Hello, everybody. In this episode of AI Coach, we will be speaking with Jonathan Hines, who is Director of Debate at Head Royce School and also the Chief Executive Officer of Debater Hub. We are also joined by the Chief Technology Officer at WageUp and Debater Hub's Chief Financial Officer, Devin Garnier. Together, they make Debater Hub, a company working to combat emerging information threats to democratic decision making by integrating dialectical reasoning in AI. Debater Hub's goal is to advance machine learning research by creating an automated rebuttal generator, playfully called ARG, trained on data from competitive academic debates. The aim is to encourage critical thinking and optimize research by partnering with search engine and social media companies. Everybody, please welcome John and Devin. Excellent. Hello, thank you very much for joining me.
Thanks so much for having us, Jared. We're really excited to talk about what we've been working on.
Yeah, it's
Excellent.
a pleasure to be here.
Well, let's start off. Why don't you just give us a foundational understanding of what Debater Hub is and the inspiration for creating it?
That's a long story. I'll try to be brief. It seems like every time I tell it to somebody, I tell slightly different parts of it. Devin and I have been working on this directly for almost 2 years now. And it really stems from simple, we love debate and we want to give back to a community that was so important to us. Debate is foundational in my professional life. I would not have gone to college or graduated from college or gotten a master's degree if it weren't for debate. I think it's the most important, one of the most important things that I could teach every day. Like I tell my students in my class, I teach debate because I think it's one of the most valuable skills you're going to learn, especially right now in our society. And so we came together and we're like, we're going to build this tool, and we want the tool to serve as a support for democracy, to be honest, right? We think that we're kind of in an information crisis as a society. And debaters have a uniquely valuable skill set in learning how to and understanding how to navigate this information crisis we're experiencing. And so it just kind of started 2 years ago as like, Devin had an idea for a tool. I had been looking for a way to give back to the debate community, and it's really kind of evolved from there.
So, Devin, what's your background in debate, and what kind of, I don't know, what did you carry into your sort of life path into like software development?
Yeah, that's a great question. I also debate was incredibly important for me as a high schooler. I didn't do debate in college, but I don't think I would be anywhere near the person I am today without having that foundation of critical thinking. I went on to study philosophy in college, and John also studied philosophy in college. Then did some traveling around China and came back home and decided that I started doing some research, reading some books by thinkers like Nick Bostrom and Stuart Russell, who talked a lot about where AI is going. And it occurred to me that artificial intelligence represents an opportunity to do philosophy in a very unique way, as a moment in history, human history, in the sense that we're creating a mind more actively. And so that's when I decided I wanted to do a complete kind of career shift. Ended up going to Columbia University, getting a master's degree in machine learning. So kind of developed a strong foundation in computer science and began building out web applications and that's kind of where my focus is now. But I came to the intersection between debate and artificial intelligence and computer science because I really think that debate is an incredible overlooked opportunity. I mean, the way when we think about reasoning, when we think about thinking, when we think about how our minds work, they're very dialectically structured.
Okay.
And I feel like there is, to me, the debate creates an excellent opportunity to try to tap into a lot of those principles. So, I had a sort of a revelation one night that this would be a fun project to pursue. I asked my old debate coach, who connected me up with John, And then we started talking and working through these ideas. And what sounded initially as kind of a long shot connection to AI became a foundational driving force behind what we're trying to do, which is help the debate community while at the same time being a part of this pivotal moment in human history where artificial intelligence is coming into fruition. And we want to take the brilliance and the wisdom and the exceptional dialectical reasoning that occurs in debate and use it.
Yeah, we were talking earlier about how we like the phrase inflection point as this moment in history where, like, I'm pretty giddy when I go into class these days to talk with my students and to share with them the capabilities that just GPT has today, let alone start thinking about the things that might come in the future. And one of the things was definitely how it's not just a search, it's a conversation that you get to have, the dialectical reasoning that you're talking about. So what sort of challenges does the dialectical part pose for generating something like the automated rebuttal generator?
That's a big question. There's a lot to unpack there, as far as what that would look like as far as a argument rebuttal generator. The argument rebuttal generator is kind of like our further off product vision, so to speak, right?
Okay.
And that's definitely a component that we think debate provides kind of like the substrate for, or the debate community provides the substrate for. Kind of like going back as far as like what motivated initially, we started talking about this concept of infopocalypse, Devin and I. We read it in Stuart Russell's book, Human Compatible, which is a whole book about what's referred to as the alignment problem, right? Like AI is coming, and what happens if you reach an artificial intelligence that is as intelligent or even scarier, more intelligent than humanity. And how do we make sure that that intelligence is aligned with humanity's intentions? And we started looking at that in the context of infopocalypse, and we're just kind of overwhelmed with information, fake news, fake media, what's happened in our political system since, most Americans would say 2016, but in honesty, if you research, Russian disinformation, misinformation campaigns, this has been going on since right after the Cold War ended. And so the vision for this argument rebuttal generator, we've also described it as Grammarly for argument. Grammarly, right? Kind of the vision for it would be this tool that anywhere you're writing or anywhere you're encountering text-based or even audio-based or visual-based persuasion, it could dissect that persuasion that you're encountering, right? And identify the argumentative components of that persuasion you're encountering. And it kind of stems from this idea that fact-checking alone is insufficient, right?
Of course.
Any debater will tell you fact-checking alone is not going to win you an argument. But the first response that, the concerned social body has responded with these disinformation, misinformation campaigns. Oh, we need all this fact checking. And there's an explosion of fact checking tools out there. But those fact checking tools just play into the narrative, right? Because you're not creating counter narratives and counter arguments that those facts sit within. So the goal of ARG, was a tool like a fact checker, but taking it to a much deeper level.
Okay.
That's where we're going. Right. How do we get there? Because first you have to train a model on how to do that. Right. And if anybody spent any time playing with ChatGPT, you quickly encounter the limitations of ChatGPT. Right. It can't take a position. It can't keep track of a position. Right. Like if you can force ChatGPT to debate for you.
Right.
But really all ChatGPT is good at is just generating content. Right. It can't really understand the positionality in a debate from a dialectical perspective, right? Debate in a dialectical perspective, we have an affirmative or negative, pro, con, whatever terminology you want to use for that dialectical approach that all debaters use. You have a position, you counter that position, right? Two theoretically opposing sides, and you look for the most efficient and economical resolution of those two sides, right? And so the challenge then is to create a model that is capable of doing that. IBM Project Debater attempted to do something like that. Ultimately, they failed. And we think a lot of the reason they failed is because they lack a real in-depth understanding of debate. It was computer scientists who loved debate, and debate was a hobby for them.
Right.
But they didn't really understand debate at a deep level, at a dialectical level, at a philosophical level. And I think that's why they failed. And so we're now approaching it from the perspective of debaters who also have computer science,
Right.
machine learning, and NLP capabilities, and we're going to approach it from that perspective.
So just to add on, to
go
that a
ahead,
little bit, if that's okay. You mentioned generative AI, I think earlier, which is kind of the buzzword that's being used, and kind of where we're going is more persuasive AI, which is this distinction between the production of content versus the production of content towards a particular aim or as a representation of a particular position to convince you of something. And to accomplish persuasive AI, you really, in any machine learning problem, you kind of have two main categories. You have the architecture, which is really the design of the algorithms. If we're talking about neural networks, it's, am I using a convolutional layer here versus, something else? Are we using reinforcement learning? What are all the different components that are the pieces, the Tetris of the algorithms and how they're going to coordinate and achieve the goal? And then there's the data set, right? So any well-designed architectural system has to be trained on a data set. There is no great debate data set. And the data sets themselves, because going back to your original question about the challenges and where we play in and why what we're trying to accomplish can serve a purpose towards persuasive AI, is in the same way that there's been data sets like ImageNet, right, which were revolutionary. A professor, I think in California, put their whole budget behind the production of this giant data set of images, then hosted that are annotated and tagged, then hosted competition. People came in and really neural networks weren't even on the map until about the third or fourth year of that competition, in which neural networks just crushed it. And it just completely changed the direction of machine learning. Right. So you can point to a lot of the pivotal development of machine learning over the past 6-7 years. I mean, we wouldn't have ChatGPT today if we didn't have ImageNet. Okay. So in a way, you can trace back a lot of the foundational breakthrough discoveries as much to the creation and management of a unique data set as to the creation and management of a unique architecture. Okay. So we have to obviously tackle both to achieve a really solid persuasive AI. But right now our focus is, working with the most cutting edge architectures that are currently available, and then taking this very unique data set, which is debate, which is brilliant minds going at it with one another, capturing the nuances of arguments and how they relate in a flow-like structure, where you have a kind of graph-based system for mapping all these arguments together. That is a powerful data set. And I think that's comparable to ImageNet in terms of getting us from generative AI to persuasive AI.
So you were talking about data and architecture. And one of the things that I notice when I'm trying to get ChatGPT to debate is keeping it on point. There is one thesis that was mentioned in the first speech, but by the time you get to the fourth speech, it's lost it. It's just doing line by line. Is that what you mean? The architecture? Is that
that is technically an architectural issue that will probably be solved by GPT-4, by the way. This has to do with attention heads, which has to do with how far back can the model pay attention and learn how to. Attention is a very important concept, which is its own longer discussion. Okay. It has to do with how much weight do I give to a particular sentence or concept, and its understanding. And it only has a certain range that it can pay attention to. So if you go on long enough, it starts the earlier parts of the conversation kind of fall off. That's an architectural problem. Okay. Which is going to be significantly improved in the next iteration of GPT-4. And in just general, it's going to be, I think that by the end of this year, those kind of problems will be relatively minimal, where the hardware, the architectural improvements will be vastly improved. Okay. Which is good, because not only do I want it to be able to pay attention to the first speech, but I wanted to pay attention
Right.
to other debates. I wanted to pay attention to broader context and evidence and
Right.
get into the nitty gritty of all those aspects.
So, John, do you have any concerns about, especially specifically your goal on producing ARG? Is there like ethical concerns? How do you approach those ethical concerns, especially things like, political correctness, freedom of speech?
No, that's the core of our motivation, right? Like we said, infopocalypse is the problem we're trying to solve, right? Like democratic deliberation, decision making, right? Societal well-being, right? Is our our big picture goal, right? It's if you want to make an impossible task for yourself, tell everybody you're going to try to save democracy, right? But that's kind of our motivating factor, and obviously within that are questions of political correctness, bias, et cetera, et cetera. So to understand the bias and the ethics problem, it's important actually to go back to ImageNet and what Devin was describing, right? Because the problem of bias within your algorithm, within your model, has everything to do with the data you put into that model, right?
Right.
And so ImageNet, right, that was a curation of images that were publicly available on the web. And then they went in and annotated all those images, right? Meaning by annotation, they identified what it was, right? Cat, 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 right? All the iterations of cat, right? All the iterations of dog. And then they trained the system to begin to learn how to identify those things. The problem was that data set was biased in and of itself, right?
Right.
Because the images we see on the internet are biased because society has bias, right? The way we represent African-American males in our society, the way we represent African-American women in our society, the way we represent Asian men and women, the way we represent women in society, right? All of those representations got thrown into ImageNet.
Right.
And then ImageNet was like, well, this is what you've done, right? And then we blame ImageNet. Really, that's a reflection of society,
right.
And the data set that we chose, right? And so that's why Devin and I think that our data set is so important and valuable. And we met with a leading researcher in the NLP space, right? In this generative AI space. And what he said to us when we were talking about our data, and he's interested in looking at our debates, he said it's no longer about as much data. The big data is not what we want. We want quality data.
Right.
And quality data is how we can strive towards alignment. And so when we talk alignment and say like alignment and safety, you should automatically think like ethics, right? How do we make sure it does what we want it to do as a society? How do we make sure it's aligned with human values and what we think those values mean? And the reason we love debate is because we debate about those values explicitly.
Okay.
Right?
Right.
And so if we can train our AI in a system that doesn't just ignore those issues or hope those issues somehow get resolved, we openly debate those issues in our community. Right? And we're not perfect. We mess it up. But we debate it openly. Right? And in the world of policy debate, it becomes the substance of the debate.
Right. Because one of the things about debate, or one of the things that people misunderstand about debate is how much of your arguments, specifically like values, are implied in conversational debate that needs to be explicit in a competitive debate. You need to actually say, this is our value, whereas like you have to make that assumption elsewhere.
Sure.
Yes.
And I mean, for example, doing Lincoln Douglas debate was largely what brought me into policy debate, critiques, things like that, which brought me into philosophy to begin with, is the realization that, ethics does not have, in my strong opinion, which I would be happy to defend, ethics does not have a singular objective truth. It's an exploration.
Right.
So when we think about AI alignment and AI ethics, we can't just like program a formula. We can't do Isaac Asimov's 3 laws. We can't just say this is rule number 1 and rule number 2 and rule number 3. You have to have a process of ethics is a reasoning process. It's an exploration. And that's one of the first things I learned in debate is the realization that when we stand up and have a value criterion discussion, what we're really talking about is measuring how should we evaluate ethics? How should we make a conclusion about what is more ethically correct than another? And there is no answer to that question. It is an exploration that is contextualized and dependent upon society and the participants and the actors and all these different factors. So critical to the idea of ethics being incorporated into AI is the ability of an AI to have ethical reasoning, which requires being able to balance multiple sides and see pros and cons and compare different viewpoints. If you don't have that, you're doomed to fail because there is no single answer. There is no single formula.
Yeah, and I'll add one more thing because I assume you have other questions, Jared. I just want to point out, Devin mentioned earlier that he thinks what we're doing can advance NLP research and AI research more broadly. This is one of those areas where we think it can. We've been having ongoing conversations with NLP researchers, right? The people who are creating the large language models.
Yeah.
And one conversation that they keep coming back to when we talk about using debate, they're like, yeah, but y'all gamify truth. How do you know what's true? How do you get to true? And the problem that we're starting to realize is NLP researchers think there is a capital T truth that can be discovered and codified. Debaters realize that truth is a negotiated dialectical process.
Right.
And so you're not going to be able, and this is, I think, the problem that OpenAI is encountering. They're trying to institute this is what is acceptable discourse and this is what is not acceptable discourse. All right. And then you get to questions of censorship and political correctness because you're trying to institute that from above. Whereas in debate, we deliberate that out.
Right.
Yeah. Just one last quick thing before moving on. Your question was about bias.
Yeah.
And minimizing bias or identifying bias. And it's interesting to note that if we were to rewind time 30 or 40 years, how we would go about doing that would be extraordinarily different than how we go about doing it now, because we would recognize certain aspects that come up in society, because ethics is an evolving process. And so at any flash moment in time, if you try to say, oh, I've achieved the elimination of bias, or I have solved the ethical problem, you will fail. You will fail. Instead, you must build a system that evolves over time and reasons and adapts according to how ethics changes and society changes and ideas evolve.
So speaking of evolution, your project is at an evolutionary point in which you are reaching out. I wanted to give you an opportunity at this moment to do just that. John, why don't you tell people what you wanted to announce?
Yeah, thanks, Jared. We're really excited. Like I said earlier, when we started this 2 years ago, and we always joked about the 95 to 5% scenario. We were 95% sure we were just developing a cool tool that would help debaters. And we said all along, there's this other 5% where it might be really cool that we could maybe contribute to AI research in some way, and innovate education in some way. And with the explosion of ChatGPT, it's become abundantly clear that 5% scenario is now the 95% scenario. That we really think we can contribute in a major way. And we're in a historical inflection point where I think society realizes that this tech is coming and we need to get our heads around it. So the government, U.S. federal government, USFG, announced last week a prize challenge that they're calling the Vital Prize Challenge. And the Vital Prize Challenge is kind of being compared to DARPA for education. For people who don't know, DARPA is the Defense Advanced Research Projects. It's like all the crazy cutting edge research that the military does, like the AI bots and stuff like that. And they want to do it in education. And they're looking for teams of people to propose cutting edge projects in education. And there's a prize centered around that. So we are in the process of meeting with and negotiating with various stakeholders in the debate community to get them to participate in this prize challenge with us. The Debater Hub is going to enter the Vital Prize Challenge, and our goal is to develop a debating AI. And what we would like to do is to get the recorded debates that we have all these wonderful recorded debates over the past couple of years. The benefit of COVID is that we have amazing, high quality recordings of debates for 2 years. And what we would like to do is to take those debates and translate them into our platform, and put them into our platform, into our flowing system. And that's going to allow us to accomplish two goals. One is it allows us to alpha test / beta test our system so that it can be ready for in-round competition. We should probably explain in a little more detail what our platform does. That it'll be ready for in-round competition. But two, if we can get people to help us flow these debates into our platform, we can begin to use that data set to start building a machine learning and NLP model that we can use to create educational debate tools to teach people how to debate, free tools to teach people how to debate. So, I'm approaching the National Association of Urban Debate Leagues tomorrow to try to get them on board with this challenge. I'm going to approach the National Debate Tournament and CETA to try to get them on board with this challenge. So we are making an open call to stakeholders, leadership in the debate community who want to be involved in the Vital Prize Challenge to reach out at us at debaterhub.com and let us know. We're looking for national organizations who would like to be involved and formally throw their hat in the ring as partners with us in this challenge. And we're looking for coaches who want to help us input these flows, these debates into the system. They can allow us to quality test the system, and we can start to build the machine learning model. And that's, we're about to do our beta release, and kind of what we're thinking is that's how you're going to jump the line in the beta process. If you volunteer as a coach, if you volunteer and help us test our system and input flows into the system, then you're going to jump to the line of the beta release so that you could start using the platform for your team in actual competitive rounds next season.
Should we take a second to show off the tool real quick?
Yeah, I think that would probably be useful.
Absolutely. So if you can present if you want to at the bottom there, and just get your and I could throw it up on the screen and we could take a look at it. Now I put the link, it's debaterhub.com, yes?
Right. Yep.
All right. So for everybody who's watching,
I'm sharing right now. Can you see my screen?
Yep, here we go.
There we go. Yep.
Awesome. So yeah, this is the tool. It's a flowing tool.
Okay.
You have several different views available to you. You have, for example, a global view where you can kind of keep track of all of the speeches. You have a localized view. You have a presenter mode and various pages that you can work with. So let's say we go over here and I want to focus on maybe just the first 4 speeches. I can kind of narrow it down. If I want to create a new argument, click on the speech that I want to be a part of. Here's an argument, and then it gets added to the flow. If I want to add a rebuttal, it gets added to the flow. On top of that, we have the ability to take, for example, a paperless file. Let's see if I can find one here.
So paperless debate is where, debaters post up their evidence and arguments for other people to use, specifically within debate rounds, so you can share it with your opponents who need to be able to analyze it.
That's right. Yeah. So it allows you to, it's going to take your document. Unfortunately, I don't have a document handy, but you can take a document, pull it up. It's going to create a tree of all your files and then just drag arguments straight into the flow.
Excellent.
So you have lots that you can do here. It's also going to be, one of the things that we've been in discussion with is to what extent one would be able to reference ChatGPT-3 or GPT-3 to help with brainstorming and thinking through arguments. You can come over here and you can, create a new page if you wanted to create a new page. And so you have all kinds of tools at the ready for managing really in-depth flows. So I'm gonna stop sharing so we can return to the discussion.
Yeah.
And we plan on releasing a more in-depth demo where we're going to flow an entire debate end to end and show it off so that everyone can kind of see what's going on. John's working on that right now, and that should be imminently released.
Well, do you see this having application outside of competitive debate, and how so?
Well, so there's so many applications outside of competitive debate. When we start talking about a persuasive AI, right? If we're capable of generating a persuasive AI, it's the same reason you tell people debate's the most important skill you're going to learn, right? If you look at all the soft skills that employers talk about they want, that there can be a wide variety of AI assistants are coming in the future, right? So if we're
Right.
talking about that inflection point about what's about to happen in the world around us, I think I think I mentioned this to you before, Jared. I think we're at the level of inflection point that's similar to like railroads, electricity,
Mhm.
that moment in American history and in industrial history. There's going to be pre-AI and post-AI in future discussions about the moment we're in right now. And I think that this type of tool will become the next level kind of like AI assistant that helps you navigate through the world, right? If you're an attorney, you can use this assistant to develop briefs. You can use this assistant to analyze potential trials. If we're capable of like linking in with Tab Room and bringing in our judge information to debates and to analyze how your debate affected your audience based on what we know about your audience, that tool could theoretically be used in a court before even going to court, right? Analyze a particular judge's voting history, analyze the demographics and history of your potential jury pool, and identify the arguments in the case and whether or not you should take this case to trial or not. You could have the agents help you prepare for the trial.
Yeah.
I think the most immediate use case outside of the debate community would be college writing centers, and argumentative writing centers that are teaching people the elements of argumentative writing. Now, the reality of all that is I think education is going to be completely transformed. The education industry is going to be completely transformed by this innovation, because the question of human labor is changing, right?
Yes.
Right. As everything is automated around us, what does human labor look like in that world?
Right.
And our vision of that world is not that AI replaces humanity, because that would not be an alignment, right? If we go back to AI alignment, AI replacing humanity would not be an alignment. But AI assisting humanity would be in alignment. And so I can't paint you the perfectly clear picture of what that looks like. But I do think our tools are playing at that bleeding edge space of creating the next level of tools that will facilitate human AI interaction and learning.
I think I can paint a little bit of a picture too, just to add on to what John was saying. Just to set the scene a little bit of how this would apply in a specific concrete example. Imagine you're in a business meeting and you have a tablet out and you're taking notes. Z-Note, what we're ultimately hoping to release, which is kind of built off the model that gets generated off of what was just shown to you, will be able to listen to the conversation, keep notes over what's been said, but then also highlight and suggest various topics or thoughtful or interesting things to mention, to bring up. So in that sense, you're there trying to think about what's happening in the meeting, how your ideas relate to the meeting, but then also you're getting kind of prompted or encouraged in different ways from this tool to kind of identify interesting thoughts that you can focus on.
Well, we could talk about this forever, and I am definitely going to keep in contact with both of you into the future. I want to thank John and Devin for joining us on this episode. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jared. We appreciate you giving us the time to talk about what we're working on.
Thank you.
All right. Excellent. So everybody will have more AI coach interviews in the future, but for now, that is the time that we have. I will see you later.